Hey everyone, how's it going? Matt Jarbo here. Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. And we're going to be talking about a movie today that I think the history of the film, or at least of its director, the controversy surrounding him, the controversy surrounding future entries in the franchise, is probably more like engaging than the film itself, even though the movie of Jeepers Creepers, by the way, that's what I'm talking about, is actually a really solid little film. It can't run away from the history surrounding its director. And it's one that caught my attention the other night. I happened to just kind of be like surfing through Tubi. I saw that they had Jeepers Creepers 1, Jeepers Creepers 2 were on there. So I just said, you know what, let's just watch the first few minutes and see what happens. Lo and behold, I end up watching the whole movie. And then last night I went through the other 3 films in the franchise. So we're going to be talking about that over the course of the weekend. And there's a lot of stuff here you may not know about the history of the film, which is one of the reasons why you guys come to Podio Commentary. I like to think hear my thoughts on the film, as well as kind of doing more of a dive into the history of it and how it came to be and everything else in between. And that's why today, for this one, I just want to say that it really is going to require you to separate the art from the artist, especially when it comes to the abuse of children. And that is going to be a no-go for a lot of people, and that is understandable. That is valid, and you should not feel bad for not wanting to engage. I'm trying to look at this through the lens of the film, how the film came to be, and its lasting impact, lasting legacy, and my overall thoughts on it. But it is very, very, very difficult to separate the art from the artist when it's something that is what it is. And we'll talk a bit about that. So if you don't know what the synopsis for the movie is, let me just give you a quick overview. Jeepers Creepers follows the story of Trish and Darry Jenner. They are siblings driving home from college who encounter a mysterious truck, and that truck has a driver who's dumping bodies down a pipe. They decide to investigate this very much against their own better judgment and ultimately become chased by the driver himself, as we come to find out is basically a demon who is feasting on the body parts of people in needs every 23 years for 23 days. It feeds. And that's really all we know about the character of the creeper. Like, it's really simple. This movie is very, very, very simple in its premise. It really only has a couple of actors in the movie. Like, Justin Long and Gina Phillips play Trish and Darry. This is Justin Long's first movie. He was 22 years old when they shot it. And it is very much just a movie about a bunch of people on the side of a highway. And the sequel is almost identical to it. And the third movie is almost identical to that. It's very weird how the story of this, what almost comes across like a cicada type thing, or one of those moths that only, bury itself for 7 years, I think, or whatever. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this thing, right? It really does run alongside a fictional highway in 3 fictional counties that are all created by Victor Salva for his movies, right? So he's got his own kind of Silva universe. And that is actually kind of makes things even worse when we talk about who Victor Salva is, or Victor Salva. I've been saying it wrong. I apologize. Although maybe I shouldn't apologize. I don't know. But Victor Salva wrote and directed this movie. And what you need to know about him is that back in 1988, while he was working on his directorial debut, a movie called Clown House, he was busted and convicted for committing sexual misconduct with one of the underage stars, a boy who was 12 years old at the time. His name is out there. That information is out there. And ultimately, they got him for that, videotaping this child. They also found commercial videotapes and magazines containing child endangerment stuff. And, he pled guilty. He pled guilty to lewd and lascivious conduct, oral sex with a person under 14, and for procuring of child. He was sentenced to only 3 years in state prison, of which he only served 15 months. But the caveat to that is that he had to register as a convicted sex offender for life. And once he got out of prison, he ultimately completed parole in 1992. Here's where things get a little bit on the interesting side, because he started then being a telemarketer and writing screenplays in the evening. He started work on Jeepers Creepers, got it in the hands of Francis Ford Coppola, who, by the way, is like a mentor of Victor Salva's, who produced Clown House through American Zoetrope, which is a production house co-created by Coppola and George Lucas back in 1969. Coppola also funded and produced Clown House, knowing damn well what Victor Salva did, what he admitted to doing, and what he was ultimately convicted of. But yet, when it came to getting his career back on track, Coppola really aided in that. And that was one of the things, because you may not know this, or you may know this, is that Victor Salva directed the 1995 movie Powder, starring Sean Michael Flannery. And that movie had its own controversy because that was a Disney-made movie, and Disney did not know about Victor Salva's previous record until they were well into production. And then the victim of Victor Salva actually protested the release of the film when it came out, which got some attention back in the 90s. But this is before the age of the internet, and that will come into play when we talk about Jeepers Creepers 3, by the way. But this is before all of that happened. And so what you were looking at is a situation where, yeah, people knew about it, but because it wasn't as widespread, and he's a relative nobody, he's not like Pee Wee Herman masturbating in a porn theater, people kind of just look the other way. And that's how Hollywood operates, right? It doesn't matter what you do, provided your last movie can make some money. So it's pretty crazy, because even Victor Salva has talked about this. He's been interviewed about what happened, when he was in his late 20s and he had molested a 12-year-old boy. It's in his words. Here's what he says. He says, "This has followed me around ever since it happened. But once people meet me, the phantoms go away and they realize I made a stupid mistake years ago. My past is going to follow me around for as long as people want to talk about it." Now, what I didn't really hear in there is like an apology for what he did. I mean, an acknowledgement of past mistakes, but this is a pretty big mistake. It's a pretty meaty, pretty disgusting mistake. And again, if you have trouble separating the art from the artist, then this particular next set of, episodes are not going to be for you. And that is, again, okay. And it's valid and it's fair. Because once Powder came out and once all that died down, Salva then wrote the screenplay for Jeepers Creepers. He actually wrote it in a month. And a lot of people actually believe that he based the concept of the opening of the film on the case of Dennis Depew. Now, what happened here is that Dennis Depew was spotted dumping his wife down a pipe. And then he went on the run. And then Unsolved Mysteries covered it in 1991. The next day, Depew got into a shootout with police and then ultimately committed seppuku. So there's elements of this that people seem to think are what the concept, or at least the opening idea of what Trish and Darry see came from this specific incident. Now, Silva himself, or Salva himself, has never actually like confirmed that. He's never actually like given you the thumbs up or thumbs down on it, but it seems to be a point of discussion for a lot of fans and critics, believe it or not. But the thing is that he wanted to kind of change a little bit of the approach to these movies, right? These slasher films or these creature films. So when he was writing this movie, he focused on male victims to challenge genre and gender norms. He used a lot of like red herrings to mislead the audience about the film's ending. But unfortunately, there were some budget cuts, and that ended up really kind of scrapping a lot about the third act of the film, which I think kind of hurt the movie, and we'll talk more about that towards the end. But anyway, once he finished the script, he got Francis Ford Coppola on board. Coppola helped raise the money. I think MGM put up like 2.7 million, and the rest of the money had to come in from German companies who put up, I think, $7.5 million to give this thing a rounded budget of about 10 million. And you can kind of see when you watch this that like all 10 million are on screen. They stretched that quite a bit for what they were trying to do when they shot the movie in the summer of 2000. But it looked like that gamble actually paid off on August 31st, 2001, when the movie came out, and it was a hit. It was a very, very, very big hit, despite the fact that it received mixed reviews from critics. I think about a 46% positive rating from Rotten Tomatoes and a D rating on CinemaScore. Now, the D rating, again, when we talk about the movie itself, the ending of the movie is why the film has got a D rating. If you remember the ending, you know what I'm talking about. But if not, just hold on. The movie ultimately went on to gross roughly about $59.2 million worldwide off a $10 million budgeted movie. One that MGM had no faith in. Justin Long has famously said that there was no premiere for Jeepers Creepers because MGM had like zero faith in the movie. They thought that it wasn't going to bring in any money whatsoever, and it happened to be a pretty damn big surprise hit for the amount of money that it was able to generate. And that's one of the reasons why it spiraled out into doing a whole bunch of sequels and even a very god-awful reboot. There is something inherently frightening about the character of the creeper, what it's doing when it hunts, and of course the isolationist aspect of where the hunting ground is. And even though the general plot of the movie is slim, it does convey those elements well enough to get you sucked into the story, as well as kind of caring about the two characters, the brother and sister, because even though they did kind of improvise a lot of stuff, one of the things that I think they did well was they played off each other. It did kind of feel like bickering siblings that even when like stuff got tight, when it got tough, when it got hard, they would still stick together. And that's largely a lot of what they did. But let's actually talk about the film itself, because for such a small movie, it really did try to use as much as it possibly could. The first roughly about, I think, 15 to 20 minutes of the damn movie are just Justin Long and Gina Phillips basically by themselves in a car driving down a long, windy highway in what is supposedly Florida, right? Somewhere in the South. They encounter the big green truck with the license plate BEU, and of course they end up seeing him dump the body down the pipe. Now, one of the reasons why the creeper went after them was because he smells what is, their fear, their pheromones. And when they saw him dump the body, they were scared, and he was able to pick up on that. And that's why he was trying to scare them even more by chasing after them. He wanted to scare them to see what it is that he would need from them. And of course, none of this is explained at this point in time. So it's just this like random guy in a truck honking his horn. Very, very, very similar to Steven Spielberg's first feature film, Duel, which was the one guy being harassed and chased by a faceless semi-truck driver. The first little bit of this movie very much ties into that particular concept, which I thought was actually pretty cool. It plays on our fears of being in the unknown element of like not familiarity of like where we live, running afoul of somebody with road rage or whatever. And then, just that isolationist aspect of it. But of course, against their own better judgment, they want to go and investigate what went down that pipe. And their justification for that, I thought, was quite interesting, because it's that idea of like, what if they're alive? What if they need help? And what if it was you? And like that idea of the siblings wanting to like use that against one another was kind of underhanded, but it worked for the idea of trying to get Trish to go back, to agree to go back. Because obviously Darry was drawn to it. He wanted to help because he's the helper. But when they get down into the pit and he discovers the wall of bodies, this is what took me out of this scene. So when Darry goes in there and we start, he's walking around the underbelly of the church and he starts seeing all the tools and you start like, it's all dark, right? The cave is all dark. Everything is all dark. And then as he sees the couple from like the urban legend, because I mentioned this early on about a couple 23 years earlier who had died or went vanishing. They're presumed dead. And he sees them stuck on the wall and sewn together while holding hands. She had been decapitated, but he sewed her head back on the body and then left them there to be preserved. And there were all the other bodies on top of everything else, right? So you see here, it's like this cave of hundreds of bodies, all preserved, all ready to go. Yeah, I don't know. It's freaky, but like, because of the low budget, it looked like it really, really, really did just look like a bunch of blow up dolls on the wall. I know they weren't supposed to be blown up, but it looked like that's like, there's some bad effects in this movie, but like this one was like pretty bad because they were trying to explain away all of the like, the low quality of the mannequins. Right. The lack of having the ability to have all the blood and decay and stuff. I get all that, but they're trying to justify it by saying that they were petrified. But why were they petrified? If he just feeds for 23 days, why were they petrified? It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's still never explained. Right. And I think that's a problem with the franchise as a whole. And it kind of runs into the same problem that like paranormal activity movies have. So when I dive into the paranormal activity movies, we'll be able to talk about the plots on those as well. And like how they kind of like piecemeal out the story without ever really giving you the full thing. So you have to keep coming back for more. But again, because of Victor Salva and his reputation and his history, we're never going to be able to get to the end of that run, I don't think. But anyway, like from there, they get out of there, they go try to find help. And it seems like no one cares. Like they go to this diner. No one's around on the highway, but they go to this diner. Everyone's there. They're looking to call the cops. They want to get some help. No one seems to give a crap what's going on. No, like it's the weirdest thing. It's almost like the town is in some kind of hypnosis. Like they just know that things go missing or things are weird or things are odd, but they're not going to comment on it. They're not going to talk about it because they just don't want to deal with it. I think in a realistic situation, two kids come in freaked out, talking about dead bodies, needing the police. Like people are going to pay attention to this. But then they get the call from the psychic who knows Darry by his name, who says exactly what they saw and says that the creeper is coming. If you hear Jeepers Creepers, run. And that's obviously to set up the plot for like, if you hear the song Jeepers Creepers, which you only hear twice in the movie, once in that scene, and then later on, in a chase sequence. And that's really about it. And it's pretty funny because I think like there was like the rights issue because there's a song, Jeepers Creepers, right? We all know the song, but they still have to pay the rights to license it. So they wrote the movie with the name of that song as the creature. I think that's pretty funny. But this is where it gets weird, as if it's not weird already. You've got a creature or a person is killing people. You've got a town that doesn't really seem to notice or care. And then all of a sudden, here's a psychic who knows where you are, where you're at, can give you pinpoint accuracy details of everything. And they still think it's a hoax or a prank or whatever. Like there's a lot of dumb decisions when it comes to that kind of stuff with this movie. And this is like the problem with horror is when you get into horror and horror starts having those moments of just like, okay, come on, like just like think for a second, think McFly, think. And they stop doing that. Now, there was a lot of improvisation that happens throughout the course of the movie, the course of making it. And I think in those moments, you can really see that particular mindset come out. Because you can see when like Trish and Darry start getting really defensive over everything with the psychic. That's when I feel like they're just ad-libbing because they don't know what else to do with it. Okay, let's talk about the psychic plot point for a minute because I feel like that is something that's a recurring theme throughout the entirety of the franchise. But it's never properly explained in a way that makes it make sense. It's just kind of there. It's a MacGuffin, I think. I think it's a MacGuffin as or at least as a plot device to move everyone forward. It's just to like, we need to find a way to explain the creeper. And we need to find a way to bring these characters up to speed. So we're just going to use a psychic without ever really giving a rhyme or reason as to why the psychic is there in the first place. And that's basically this character. And like I said, like every time she's on screen and she's bickering with the two actors, that's a lot of improvisation and it's just not very good, unfortunately. But, it is what it is. And then, like, you get towards the end of the movie when the big climax happens and the creeper starts breaking into a police station and feeding on some inmates in order to repair itself, which is actually pretty cool. And then it kind of sets up what could be seen as this, like, Terminator-esque moment of the creeper just going through the police station and just eviscerating everybody. But he doesn't. Because he doesn't need to. Yeah, he's going after Darry. Like, he smells something on Darry. And that's who he wants. And we know that. But he also doesn't kill unless he has to. Like, the only reason why he killed the cat lady early on is just because she fired a shot off at him and she got in his way. So he killed her. But he didn't need anything out of the psychic, so he let her live. It's a really interesting dynamic that I would have loved to have spent more time developing. We know that the creeper wants certain things from certain people because that's how he feeds. But we don't know how much of them he needs. We don't know how much of the body parts he needs to sustain himself for 23 years. We don't know any of that. Because when he does get attacked earlier on with the like by Trisha's car and she's running over him. By the way, have you guys noticed when you watch this movie, none of the cars like can run properly? Like every single vehicle in this franchise is just like so woefully under-maintained. Just, it is what it is. But she runs over him multiple times and then he ends up like having to feed in order to repair himself. So why does he need to keep feeding on people if he's just going to eat something that's right there in order to bring himself back to full health? Like if parts of people are his metapacks, if you're thinking about this from a video game perspective, then what is he hibernating for? Wouldn't he already have like multiple hearts, multiple eyes, multiple ears, multiple tongues? Because there's a part where like he kills a cop and he eats the tongue of the cop. That's the first time we really see him devour a human body part. And I know there's a deleted scene where he like speaks to Darry. And I think they should have left that in because I feel like that would have at least like explained more so what he was doing. But he is creepier without having the ability to talk, at least in this movie. The next movie, it gets a little comical. And then in the third movie, it's just, oh my God, oh, he's like magic. Instead of just being a demon, which is kind of the idea of what he is, it gets progressively crazier as Victor Salva tries to make him more and more and more dangerous rather than treating him like what he is, which is an apex predator, feeding before a long hibernation. But you also have to expand the lore, and this movie doesn't really do anything to expand the lore. So at the end, when Trish is trying to talk the creeper into taking her, kind of taking on her final girl persona, so to speak, he doesn't do it. And he takes, he flies away with Darry. And then you get to the last shot of the movie, which is in an abandoned meatpacking plant. There's a whole bunch more bodies on the wall. The creeper is sewing something together. And then we see, Justin Long's body, because he's got that rose tattoo over his navel, which is still so weird. And he's missing his eyes. And then we see his eyes. And then that's that. They're in their creeper now, right? Ooh. There's a reason why the movie has a D cinema score. Because there's no resolution to the plot. It's a fine movie. It's still a fun movie. I think it still holds up real well. But there's no real definition to the plot. Like there's just no finale to it. He grabs him, flies away with him. You figure at that point it would have been something along the lines of like, all right, let's go after him and let's try to save Darry. Maybe we can save him in time. And you figure with all the people that the creeper just swipes away with, that somebody would have tried to do that. They kind of do in the sequel, which I think is a superior film. And I'll talk about that tomorrow. But with this one, I feel like that's probably what audiences really just didn't like. Because it's not that you always have to have it kind of wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow. But having some kind of conflict resolution rather than just like having your hero be, unceremoniously killed. And then that's that. It really does rub audiences the wrong way, even though realistically that's what would happen. In a situation like that, that's what would happen. He would be gone. He would be killed. He would be devoured. And you would never find his body. Like legitimately, that's how it would be. But audiences don't want that because that's not, to be fair, that's not great storytelling. So it's kind of like when you look at Jeepers Creepers, the first movie as a whole, you start to see that there is a lot there that is worth mining. There's a lot of lore that could be pulled from. There's a lot of things that could be done to kind of like really keep the characters moving, keep the audience right there with them, and then kind of like expand outward. Like I mentioned, Paranormal Activity. They started doing that just small. And Jeepers Creepers 2 and Jeepers Creepers 3, they do the same thing. But like by the time you get to number 3, it's completely left field. Like, my God, left field. I can't even, it was, what the hell? But number 2 is where things get completely ramped up. And I think number 2 is going to be a lot of fun to talk about, even though I feel that it's a better movie, despite the fact that there's probably not really one character in that movie you root for, care about, and want to see live. Here, you do want to see Trish and Darry live. They are siblings. This isn't a love story, but they have a bond. And you start to care about them, and you want to see that play out. And the fact that she was willing to sacrifice herself for him was really interesting. And it was a nice way to kind of turn it on its head a little bit. But the lack of a conflict resolution, that's what hurt it. So as always, I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts on this. What did you think of Jeepers Creepers? Did I miss anything that you think is interesting? Let me know down in the comment section here on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, please find me on Twitter at Podio Commentary. And I'll talk to you guys later for Jeepers Creepers 2. Have a great one, and peace out.